看一下，有的。 Hey. Hello, hello, hello. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the 50th James MacTaggart Memorial Lecture. By now, you know who I am. I'm Fatima Salaria, Chair of the Board of the Edinburgh TV Festival and the TV Foundation, and I couldn't be more excited to see you all here for what is a landmark night in the history of this festival. But before we get on to this, I just quickly want to thank the BSL interpreters Donna and Heather for their sterling work tonight. In just a moment, you're going to hear from our advisory chair of this year, Jane Tranter, who's worked closely with me, our CEO, Campbell Glennie, and Rowan Woods to shape the bold, thoughtful, and risk-taking programme we've all been part of this week. But before that, I want to talk about why we're here tonight and why the MacTaggart still matters so deeply to so many of us. At the heart of this festival is the TV Foundation, our umbrella charity that makes Edinburgh truly unique. Every pass you have bought, every partnership formed goes directly towards supporting real people through initiatives like the Network, Visionaries, the New Voice Awards, the New Writers Collective, and our Social Impact and Access bursaries. We are backing over 300 creatives this year. We are also subsidising passes for people, for freelancers, and for those with access needs. That means more people than ever have been able to join us, and people who might not have had the chance to do that otherwise. So when you bought your pass, you didn't just gain access to a festival, you opened the door to someone else. You helped build an industry that's fairer, more inclusive, and more possible. And for that, I truly thank you. A huge thanks also to Screen Scotland, our headline sponsors, whose generosity without this would never make any of this happen. So 50 years ago, the James MacTaggart Memorial Lecture was created not just to reassure the industry, but to shake it, to provoke it, to expose the blind spots, and to move the room. As the MacTaggart turns 50, the temptation is to look back. But nostalgia won't regenerate us. We don't need a retrospective, we need a reset. We're operating in a media culture that's constantly shifting, post-linear, post-trust, post-stable ground. The old certainties no longer apply. Power is scattering and audiences are splintering. And many of those stories we once relied on no longer land in the same way. And yet, UK television absolutely matters to the rest of the world. Just look at the global impact of Slow Horses, Big Boys, Adolescents, Black Mirror, Top Boys, and Planet Earth 3. Those shows just don't entertain, they resonate. They spark headlines, rewatches, deep conversations. They told stories about class. They told stories about power, identity, the planet, and about people too often overlooked, with style, substance, and swagger. Our programs still have the power to stop people in their tracks. They can lift hearts. They can ignite anger. They can provoke questions and start movements. They can whisper truths that we have buried, shout names that we've forgotten, and show us the world, not as it is, but as it should be. They remind us that storytelling is not just entertainment, it's resistance, it's remembrance, and it's revolution. But we only get that kind of television if we have the guts to make it. And when we stop asking what's trending and start asking what's true, that's when we'll see the change. This is not the time to stay comfortable, not the time for careful compromises and careful categories. The future doesn't sit neatly in a box that's marked safe to commission. Shouldn't we be building an industry where danger and daring are welcome, where stories roar instead of whisper, where we lead not with fear of getting it wrong, but with the belief that getting it right matters. And of course, we all know we can make hit formats. We can sell to the world. We generate success and scale. But that must never be all we do. Because if we stop fighting for the work that dares, the work that moves us, then why are we even here? Since becoming the chair in 2021, I've never seen the MacTaggart as a legacy moment. I see it as a live opportunity. This stage isn't something to preserve. It's something we have to earn. The next 50 years of this lecture will not be defined by one voice. They will be shaped by the people we invite in, what risks we take, and whether we stay open to being changed by the people and the stories we encounter. And that work doesn't start in a strategy document, it starts here, tonight, in this room, who you sit next to, who you speak with, who you follow up with. If something you hear tonight lands, then don't let it drift. Pick it up, build with it. Because our industry is wrestling with more than just ratings and revenues. We're asking bigger questions about identity, purpose, and cultural value. What does leadership look like in a moment like this? Not just at the top, but across every genre, in news, drama, children's, factual, and entertainment. And maybe this is the moment to say, we don't need to keep invoking Reith and MacTaggart. With respect, they were men of their time, but we are now living in ours. And it demands new reference points, new stories, and new ways of leading. So let's ask, where are the people who back brave ideas, not just the bankable ones, the ones who push boundaries, not preserve them? James Harding, who you'll hear from shortly, will take us right to the heart of that challenge. His lecture isn't just a commentary on the state of things. It's a call to lead with clarity, courage, and conviction. And I hope tonight's lecture speaks not just to those in this room, but to those who are not here, to those creatives who've had to leave this industry because the work has dried up, to those watching from the sidelines, wondering if they'll ever be able to join it, or even if they belong here. Those voices we haven't heard, the talent still waiting to be mentored, championed, seen. To senior leaders in this room, please remember you were once them. Someone gave you a hand, a moment, a quiet word of encouragement, so don't underestimate how much that still matters now. Because the future of this industry won't be built by those who play it safe. It won't be built by those brave enough to break it open. Now, it is my great pleasure to introduce the woman who steered this year's festival with brilliance, with warmth, and fierce ambition, our advisory chair, Jane Tranter. What can I say about Jane? Quite a lot, actually. Trailblazer, co-founder of Bad Wolf, the force behind his dark materials. Succession, industry, and the revival of Doctor Who. Jane doesn't just make television, she creates cultural touchstones. She's a passionate champion of regional production and values, having built a thriving hub in Cardiff. She's the former controller of drama at the BBC, a role in which she nurtured a generation of creative talent and commissioned some of the most defining shows of the 2000s. Her vision, her determination, and yes, her legendary contacts book have shaped this 50th anniversary into something unforgettable. With her session producers, her editorial collaborators, she has delivered a festival which we can all be proud of. So please join me in giving thanks and welcome to Jane Tranter.
Oh yes, I'm afraid it's me yet again. Thank you for bearing with me tonight, as I am the the filling, the small filling in the middle of this splendid sandwich of things you're going to hear from people this evening. But I would love it if you would just bear with me for a couple of minutes so I can offer to share a personal note to self with you. I'm not big on looking back. But recently, my life has given me pause to reflect on a different perspective on memory, what it offers us in the present, and how it makes, shapes, and defines our futures. This, along with the fact that the summer of 2025 marks for me a bundle of Jurassically chunky-sounding anniversaries. 40 years since starting in TV. I know it's a miracle. 30 since first attending the Edinburgh TV Festival, and here I am already. What took me so long, you might say? 10 years since starting Bad Wolf. Meant that when asked to advisory chair this year's festival, they had me at 50th anniversary. And it's all had me looking back a little bit more than usual. I love TV. I think TV is important and brilliant and enjoyable and useful. But in common with much of the world around us, it's undergoing some significant challenges. Much has and will be said on the subject of where our industry is heading across the days we spend together. And I urge you all to do what the Edinburgh Television Festival does best, dive right into that chat, both during the sessions and in your time outside them. It's a festival, not a conference. So I urge you to kick back a little and feel emboldened to speak truth to power, to say what you think. Because the future years of television will not only be built on debate and strategy delivered from the top down, but on the honesty, connectivity, and openness of how we all work with each other, and on the consistent protection and opportunity by those of us who have, quite frankly, already had our chance, to a diverse new generation of talent whose shoulders the next 50 years will be built on. As I always say, arguably way more than is necessary, the strength of the pack is the wolf, but the strength of the wolf is the pack. And if ever there was a moment to appreciate the pack and enable its diversity to grow and flourish, it's now. I believe that amongst all the other crises we are facing, our biggest one is a crisis of empathy. And I truly believe television, in whatever form we care to view it or name it, can play the most important role in steering us through. Television is all at once immediate yet boundless. Amongst the million different ways it can feel the world around us is falling apart, the programs that you make can catch us and unite us. Over the past few years, I think we've all considered the question, where does the world go from here? And probably not said in those refined terms either. It's too big a question for one person to answer, although here's looking to you, James. But television can play a vital role in helping us get to the good place through the coalescing of stories, through making tangible visions of hopeful futures, and critically, the road towards those visions, giving us something to dream of and drive towards. We can help create the building blocks of a better, kinder, more empathetic world. It's somewhere to start at least. And if it's not up to us to play our part in telling those stories, then who? Holding a mirror up to our lives and the way we live now is television's superpower. It's why the MacTaggart Lecture has always been the festival's pulse point. My first MacTaggart was Janet Street Porter's. At a time when the advisory committees and those in positions of power were mainly men, Janet, wearing a sporty skirt and trainers, tackled the 4 M's: male, middle class, middle-aged, and mediocre. So all changed there then. Maybe that's why we're in the mess we're in. I was all in, obviously, and every year I look forward to the MacTaggart as a weather vane of where our industry is at and where it needs to change and develop. This year, James Harding delivers our lecture, and unquestionably possesses all the requisite intellect, experience, leadership, courage, and brilliance to do so. Formerly, he was the editor of The Times, not a job for the faint-hearted. He moved from there to be Director of News and Current Affairs at the BBC, not a move for the faint-hearted. He went on to co-found Tortoise Media, which has so enjoyably changed and challenged the way we listen, learn, and make sense of the world, proving that his courage is matched by his vision. Tortoise Media's recent and much talked about acquisition of The Observer now sees him as its new editor-in-chief, displaying alongside of everything else a lion-hearted determination to tackle difficult subjects and questions and a committed advocacy of journalism's importance in democratic life. A long-time champion for public service, this evening, in a future-facing lecture, James will present a unique and informed perspective on public service broadcasting and the news landscape. He will propose a decisive route through our rapidly changing world of confused truth, fractured attention, and public mistrust to help build a positive and collaborative future that takes and uses the best potentials of AI. On behalf of the architects and heartbeats of this year's festival, Campbell, Fatima, and Rowan, for whom the hugest thanks to you all for your friendship and your trust in enabling me to join in this year's festival with you. I am delighted now to give up the mic to the deliverer of the 2025 James MacTaggart Memorial Lecture, James Harding.
Jane, Fatima, firstly, thank you so much. I think this is the first time I've ever been in one of these talks or things where I've taken notes during the intros. So I've written down swagger, resistance. I thought the crisis of empathy is very good, and actually the confused truth is something that if I had the chance, I'd go back and weave into what we say. I also wanted to say this. When you were talking, I was reminded of a story I was told. It was told to me by a politician, so who knows whether it was true. But he told the story of having been invited. He was early in his political career. He went to go and give a speech. It went terribly. He sits down afterwards, and the person next to him, the woman next to him, says, "Don't worry, dear. I don't blame you. I blame the people who booked you." So I just wanted to say thank you. And more seriously, I came here, as I think I've told you, all in the conversations we had, Fatima and Rowan and Campbell and Jane, we've had these conversations. I came here, I remember, as a reporter, and I think I was saying to you, Rowan, earlier on, it's just incredible. The lineup this year is just extraordinary. And so on behalf of all of us who get to come and enjoy this festival, a massive thank you to all of you. Thank you very much. When my grandmother died, she left me her typewriter. It's an old Erica. It was made by Seidel and Naumann in Dresden. And at home, it sits on the shelf by my desk. My family were German Jews living in Berlin, and my grandmother was a really strong-willed woman. And what she most wanted was to be a journalist. At exactly the moment that she was getting started, the Nazis took power. And almost as soon as they did, they barred Jews from working in the press. So you can imagine this typewriter sitting on the shelf by my desk. It feels like quite an inheritance. It's there to remind me how fortunate I am to work as a journalist. And it sits there like a question in itself, as if to say, if you have access to the ink, what are you going to do with it? Because my grandparents escaped Germany in the 1930s and came here to the UK, Elsie, my grandmother, became a tour guide. She led coaches around the country. She sat in the front of the bus, smoking about 80 silk cut a day. And she would tell these German tourists the stories of these islands, her own punchy lecture on British values, democracy and freedom of speech, rule of law and fair play. The first time I came to Edinburgh, it was with her. I was in my early teens, and she brought me along to see the sights and carry the tourists' bags in and out of the coach. I really can't think what Elsie would make of the privilege that I have today, the privilege to be back in Edinburgh, delivering the MacTaggart in its 50th year to a room of people who have the freedom to tell their stories and to voice those values to the world. But I can imagine what she, in her heavily accented way, would want to say. So I'm going to get straight to the point. While I've been writing this MacTaggart lecture, the typewriter has come to represent something else. It's become a symbol of the fear that I have for the age that we're in. The fear that politics and technology are doing untold damage to trust in the world. That on the one hand, politicians are trying to control or cancel the media, particularly news, and on the other, that AI is beginning to lay waste to the economics of information while also remaking the job of storytellers. What then for the person at the typewriter? For the reporters of news, for the program makers, for the creators of culture? A shared understanding of what's true is disappearing before our eyes. We're more divided. We're more certain we're right. We're more suspicious of the motives of others. Large numbers of people are giving up on the idea of facts. They're going with their gut on science and medicine, denying climate change. Some are getting the measles. More people are paranoid, prone to conspiracy theories, convinced that the ends justify the means. A grimly familiar past feels dangerously close, and an unrecognizable future is coming at us frighteningly fast. We live, it feels, in worried times, when fears stretch way, way beyond television. Can the market economy work for people? Will technology destroy more than it creates? Can democracy fix the problems we face? But the media, most of all television, is not a bystander in all this. We have the power to help mend so much of what's broken. There are, of course, many things to be done. And this evening, I'm going to focus largely on one. The BBC is the most important source of information in this country, and I would argue, around the world. It's the best defense of truth and trust against the lies of dictators and demagogues. It's what sets the UK apart, both from the propagandists in the likes of China and Russia, and the shouting match in the US that is doing such damage to cohesion and democracy. This evening, I'm going to make the case that if we want to build confidence in shared facts and respect for the truth, we need to establish the independence of the BBC. And I'll try to set out how. To put it beyond the reach of politicians, to resource it properly, and to open it up. It's time to choose if we want to keep chipping away at it or to double down on it, if we are, to coin a phrase, traitors or faithfuls. Because when the government established the independence of the Bank of England in 1997, it put confidence in the central institution of the economy ahead of politics. And the government today can and should do the same for the shared institution in our society by giving real independence to the BBC. At this point, I should probably let you know that I once gave a speech, and after it, Jimmy Tarbuck came up to me and said it wasn't funny enough and it was too serious. I should probably let you know he's not going to like this one. And he's probably not going to be the only one. Because the MacTaggart Lecture, of course, has been delivered by all kinds of absolutely amazing people. Playwrights and presenters, comedians and film stars. Pretty much the entire Roy family has had a go here. The old man Logan came first, then you'll remember if you were here, Kendall, and of course, as ever, Shiv came a few years later to clear up the mess. We've had a program maker, a government policy maker, a TV executive, a visionary, an actual lecturer, and that was all just the year that John Burt did it. So I'm not any of those things. I'm a journalist. I'm not an insider in the world of TV now, but I hope you'll forgive the plug, an observer. So what I'm going to do is talk about news. It's what I know. And as Fatima said, happily I'm really aware that it isn't really what happens in the room. It's what happens later in the bar that really counts. The post-match analysis. Perhaps we can get Gary to host it. Here's the TikTok video version of this year's MacTaggart, and it goes something like this. If you're a viewer of television, you just can't believe your luck. It's an all-you-can-eat buffet of tasty TV on all kinds of screens. If you're in the business, it feels like everyone's on Manjaro. The commissioners have lost their appetites and their libido, and not just metaphorically. And in news, already the most uneconomic of the food trucks, in television at least, there's bickering. Bickering over whether to serve high-fiber or ultra-processed foods that the kids like. All the while, we're fighting each other over the horrors in the world around us. But the bigger picture is a world being remade by technology and politics. Generative AI is already doing so much better and faster that we all already use it or are going to want to. It really is exciting and terrifying. We should surely know, when it comes to technology, that by now, we don't need to fear what we fear. We should fear what we want. AI is going to replace plenty of jobs and cut loads of costs. It will reprice the entertainment business and rewire the information economy. In news, it will more or less end the links business model. So by that I mean the business of referrals from search to stories. This is going to have an absolutely devastating effect on newsrooms that depend on advertising or subscriptions. So if you think that Facebook brought us post-truth, ChatGPT really might mean post-journalism. In the US, Donald Trump has normalized political interference in the media. He has intimidated the commercial media, he has incentivized self-censorship, and he has defunded public service broadcasters. We would be extremely naive to think that something similar can't happen here. The largest cohort of Americans, 36%, say they have no trust in the media at all. As it happens, exactly the same number believe the 2020 election was stolen. Donald Trump won a second term with fewer than that, with the support of 32% of eligible American voters. And as of just over a year ago, more than half of Americans believe there was a second gunman in the assassination of John F. Kennedy, and nearly 1 in 5 think the moon landings were faked and staged in Arizona. Just over 40% of people think the following statement is definitely or probably true. Regardless of who is officially in charge of the government and other organizations, there is a single group of people who secretly control events and rule the world together. Truth decay has consequences. If you want the preconditions for nativism and racism, anti-Semitism and Islamophobia, cynicism and selfishness, distrust of professionals, experts and authority, the rise of vandalism, democratic backsliding, corruption, communal division and vigilantism, It's all there in that sentence. It's in the growing suspicion that nothing we're told is true. There are many things that need to be done. We need to set the terms for the streamers, the platforms, and the tech bros who have been buying up the biggest names in news and television, who own the bots now that will generate more content than ever. This surely is where the biggest challenges to truth and trust now lie. Streamers and platforms like YouTube are treated as if they don't have the responsibilities that television has long had, as if they don't have the requirements to promote news or to give prominence to local, educational, or practical content. The principles that apply to television that enable a cohesive society and a competitive industry should surely apply to them, and the same, only more so, to AI. We're set to repeat the mistake of the first internet generation, waiting, watching, and hoping for the best. For the first time in history, the most popular source of information is not going to be human. AI will soon be able to create limitless synthetic data. In effect, billions of internets of words and pictures. A machine is behind the typewriter. And of course, essential as those things are, this, you'll be happy to hear, is not an away day for regulators. It's a festival to talk about television. So let's talk about what TV itself can do. When John McGrath, the playwright, gave the first MacTaggart Lecture in honor of James MacTaggart, he was, it has to be said, pretty bleak. TV, he said, was neglected, limited, and, quote, impotent. Its style a matter of pretty pictures. It was, he said, like listening to a symphony over the telephone. Heaven knows what he'd make of us watching it over the telephone. But the fact is that today, the real world is on TV. Television has completely confounded the doomsayers. Drama is living through a magical age of realism. We understand each other so much better than we did in 1976, thanks in no small part to reality TV. And the TV screen is so much more accessible to anyone with something to say. In that sense, it's more real, more democratic. In 1976, I think it was, Morecambe and Wise invited Diana Rigg, Des O'Connor, and Pan's People onto the Christmas special, and Bernard Delfont drew up the lineup for the Royal Variety performance on ITV. Today, the sidemen didn't need to get chosen by the channels to earn a bigger audience than either of those on YouTube. TV is the most influential and enjoyable mirror of our times. It's also the most powerful cultural force in our lives and the most creative force in our culture. The film studios, I think, have largely given up on comic or satirical films and instead seem to prefer remakes, franchises, spin-offs. TV still prizes the new idea. It's where original storytelling happens, and it's still what we all talk about. And for that reason, it's the screen. It's the screen that, whether in the home or in the hand, is what politicians want to control. That's where the resistance, polemical and better still satirical, still happens. TV is the most interesting and the most important medium in the world today, and while we have a wild ride ahead of us, it will be for years to come. Of course, I realize that it doesn't feel that way. Television is being violently disrupted and increasingly polarized. If you're a writer or producer, you're being told there's no money, or you're waiting for a green light that just never comes. If you're working at a commercial broadcaster, you can't commission half of what you want to because the TV ad market has just migrated to social media. If you're at a public service broadcaster, you worry that you can't afford the price of talent given the competition from the streamers. Then if you're at a streamer, you fear that you're in an unwinnable arms race with the other streamers chasing audiences struggling to afford the pricey subscriptions. If you're a YouTube talent with more viewers than a nightly news show, you still can't quite make the economics work. And if you're a YouTube executive who should be absolutely cock of the walk, even you have this creeping anxiety that ChatGPT is going to kill off search, and with it, the Google goose that lays the golden eggs. In other words, if you're in the entertainment business, you're thinking this doesn't feel like a golden age. If it ever did, it feels like The Last of Us. We're just trying to survive as the fungus of new things eats us alive. If it's any comfort, it's worse in news. The audience is divided. Advertising is deserting it. There's an exponential increase in AI-generated content, and with it, a new, seemingly unwinnable contest for attention. And at the same time, newsrooms are in furious argument with ourselves over the coverage of Israel and Gaza. What's happening there is heartbreaking. It's no surprise that it's the cause of such painful divisions between people. It's very hard to view dispassionately. This is true for all media organizations, and as we've seen this year, particularly the BBC. It is about as difficult as it gets in news. And then this summer, Lisa Nandy weighed in. The Culture Secretary's office insists that she did not explicitly ask Samir Shah, the BBC chair, to deliver up the resignation of the Director General after the Bob Villan death chants at Glastonbury that were streamed on BBC iPlayer. But people inside the BBC were left in no doubt that that was the message. The place became paranoid about how the BBC itself would cover the story. People around the Director General thought the political pressure would be too much. And whatever your view of the hate speech versus freedom of speech issues, an overbearing government minister doesn't help anyone. The hiring and firing of the editor-in-chief of the country's leading newsroom and cultural organization should not be the job of a politician. It's chilling. I'm Jewish, proudly so. I'm proud, too, to have worked for the most important news organization in the world. The BBC is not institutionally anti-Semitic. It's untrue to say it is. It's also unhelpful. Much better to correct the mistakes and address the judgment calls that have been wrong than smear the institution, impugn the character of all the people who work there, and potentially undermine journalists in the field working in the most difficult and dangerous of conditions. The BBC has for sure made mistakes, and I speak from experience. In my time there, I made some serious ones. It's fair to say that the BBC can be too slow to correct those mistakes, and when it does, it can sometimes overdo it, sometimes stand on its dignity. But for what it's worth, I thought the BBC was wrong not to use the word terrorist for the attacks of October the 7th. Journalists shouldn't censor words, but use them accurately. I'm in the camp that believes a brilliant football pundit like Gary Lineker should be able to have views as a citizen as well as a job as a BBC sports broadcaster. And while there's been plenty of comment on current affairs programmes on Gaza, what the BBC has run, and perhaps more importantly still, what it's pulled, I'll spare you my views, because I'm well aware that it's easier to judge the process with hindsight or sound off when you're outside it. It's different when you're in it. In fact, I might well have made or at least agreed to many of those decisions if I was still at the BBC. Because here's the point I want to make. The BBC requires a level of political judgment in its management that is unlike any other media organisation. This is not, by the way, a comment on the Director General. It's a hell of a job. I wouldn't want to do it. Anyone who cares about the BBC should frankly be grateful to Tim Davie. He's hired brilliant people, let them loose to make fantastic programs. He's transformed the business in building studios. He's spreading its footprint across the country. He's a quietly determined tech evangelist when others are putting their heads in the sand. And with a resilience that is frankly selfless, he acts as a human shield through crises and scandals that have not been of his making, but that he has answered for honourably and openly. But the point I want to make is that while mistakes will always happen, the BBC has to second-guess the consequences of those mistakes because it serves the public but answers to politicians. The BBC chair is appointed, in effect, by the Prime Minister. Richard Sharp was Boris Johnson's choice. Marmaduke Hussey was Margaret Thatcher's. Gavin Davis was Tony Blair's. Half of the board's non-executive directors are chosen by government ministers. When Emily Maitlis was here a couple of years ago, she pointed out that Robbie Gibb, Number 10's former spin doctor, is on the board and keenly involved in editorial oversight. He still is. The Chancellor, meanwhile, sets the budget. The licence fee settlement is negotiated with the Department for Culture, Media and Sport, but when it comes to it, it's decided in Number 10 and Number 11. Think about that for a moment. The most important newsroom in the country operates in the knowledge that the editorial budget is, ultimately, set in Downing Street. After he left government, George Osborne came to talk to the BBC leadership. I was no longer there at the time, but I was no longer in the room, I should say. But I'm told, in fact, I should be absolutely clear, I wasn't there and I wasn't in the room. I'd left the BBC, so I sort of went back and found out what had happened. Here's what I'm told happened. George Osborne came in and said, when he became Chancellor, he'd been surprised to discover the power that he had over the BBC. It was, he said, essentially unchecked. So allow me, if I might, just to take a trip back into the world of newspapers. When I became editor of The Times, I took William Rees-Mogg, the former editor, out for lunch. He told me the most important thing for an editor was never to get too close to the government. Never, in his words, walk into Number 10 wanting something in return. Geoffrey Dawson, who'd been the Times' editor in the 1930s, had got too close to Chamberlain, and he'd backed appeasement. When William became editor in 1967, the paper, The Times, was still trying to get over it. But the Director General and the chair of the BBC always have an eye on politics. They always have an eye on charter renewal and the licence fee settlement. And as they should do, it determines the work and the revenue of the BBC. As 2027 approaches, the BBC will move into charter renewal mode. For good reason. Its survival is at stake. This is true constitutionally. It's kind of extraordinary. If Parliament chooses not to renew the Royal Charter in 2027, the BBC will just cease to exist. This, by the way, is different from universities or other organisations that are established by charter in perpetuity. The BBC, which politicians can't help but keep on a leash, is in effect on a 10-year contract. And it's true politically. Donald Trump has, as you'll have seen, cut $1.1 billion from the funding of public broadcasters in the US, killing off the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, forcing the closure of many local stations, and hacking away at NPR and PBS. Internationally, the Trump administration has been even more sweeping, summarily sacking staff and closing down the Voice of America, Radio Free Asia, and Radio Free Europe. It's a popular move. It's backed by the majority in the House of Representatives, and it's turning into government policy the MAGA politics of bashing the mainstream media. Donald Trump has driven a partisan divide in trust. 54% of Democrats trust the media. It's just 12% of Republicans. A similar partisan gap is opening up here. 32% of Labour voters trust the media, 13% of Reform voters. And remember, the Reform Party's manifesto commitment on the BBC is this, quote, "The out-of-touch, wasteful BBC is institutionally biased. The TV licence is taxation without representation. We will scrap it. In a world of on-demand TV, people should be free to choose." In other words, the one-time reality TV star who leads reform has some bracing reality in store for TV. It's recklessly complacent to ignore it. What's happened in the US is as likely as not going to happen here. We have to address this now. Because the BBC matters beyond its own output. Michael Grade famously said here that it's the BBC which keeps us honest. It's also the BBC which keeps us together. Without anything that keeps you together, there is no flaw on the decay of truth. The BBC is a touchstone. It belongs to all of us. Even in our most furious arguments with the BBC, and let's face it, pretty much everyone in this room has had one, even in those arguments, whether it's about the subjects it chooses or about the stories or about its priorities, in those arguments we reinforce our belief that common narratives and agreed facts matter. That there is such a thing as the reality of objective truth, the importance of a sense of proportion, the openness to differences of opinion. Nearly 100 years ago, John Reith fended off a government attempt to take control of the BBC. At the height of the general strike in 1926, Winston Churchill, then Chancellor, sought to commandeer the BBC. Reith lobbied Stanley Baldwin, who was Prime Minister, and saw off Churchill's attempt to make it a mouthpiece of government. Independence has been a foundational principle, accepted by politicians, relied upon by programme makers, and expected by the public ever since. In fact, Margaret Thatcher once told David Dimbleby that, quote, every time I try to do anything about the BBC, people come out of the woodwork to defend it. Today, we still like to think there's a bipartisan commitment to the BBC. But the reality is not like that anymore. It's not a bipartisan country, and there's just not the same commitment. Political interference and the perception of a political presence looming over the BBC is a problem, and one that we've got too accustomed to. And it looks likely to get worse. We need to get on with putting the country's most important editorial and creative organisation beyond the reach of politicians now. To depoliticise the BBC means changing how appointments are made and budgets are set. The BBC chair and board of directors should be chosen not by the Prime Minister, but by the board itself, and then, like other such organisations, with the approval of Ofcom. The BBC will surely attract more, and to your point, Fatima, better people to apply for those jobs if they don't feel like the appointment is a political stitch-up. The Charter should be open-ended, and the licence fee, or any future funding arrangement, should not be decided behind closed doors by the Culture Secretary and the Chancellor, but as in countries like Germany, set transparently and rationally by an independent commission that impartially advises government and is scrutinised by Parliament. The BBC, of course, needs to be democratically accountable, and painful as it can be when you work there, the fact that it's subject to the extremely watchful eye of the press is in fact one of its strengths. In the pages of the papers that I've worked for, both the FT and the Times, we've been critical of the BBC. But accountability and scrutiny are different from control, different from politicians with a grip on the purse strings and the appointment of people at the top. For more than a decade now, politicians have talked pretty about the BBC, then piled on obligations and chipped away at its funding. The deals on the over 75s, World Service, loosening up non-payment of the licence fee. It all means the BBC's funding has been in decline in real terms for more than a decade. Cost-cutting has in fact become part of the culture of the place. But the BBC's best moves, whether it's creating the iPlayer or building Media City in Salford, these have come when it's had the budget to do new things, not just kill off old ones. BBC independence means giving it the resources it needs, not freezing its funding yet again, but doubling down. We are at the beginning of a new information age. If we want to be truly creative, innovative, and competitive globally, we can't shortchange the BBC again. We need surely to be thinking about a mix of funding, one that gets closer to doubling its resources. Obviously, given the cost of living, that's not going to happen just through the licence fee. Over 5 years, nearly 2.5 million households have dropped out of paying the license fee, and this is going to need fixing. It's expensive, and it's unfair on the people who do pay. If we believe in the universality of the BBC, we need to return to the principle in some form or other that every household pays. But happily, the license fee is not the only source of income. The BBC is building an impressive business in studios. It has the potential to earn more for its content on streamers and platforms. It should lead the way in striking deals with generative AI companies on meaningful pricing of its reliable, ceaselessly renewed library of content, something that would help set the terms for other new UK news and media companies that don't get a hearing from the new generation of tech giants. And today, the UK has a renewed commitment to global security. It's time then for a proper funding deal for the BBC World Service, the UK's most powerful expression of soft power, just at the moment that US public media is pulling back. And a side note here, the World Service's weekly audience is bigger than the entire subscription base of Netflix. Netflix, which no doubt has an exciting mantra to entertain the world, but let's face it, it's not a patch on nation shall speak peace unto nation. A properly funded World Service could reach 1 billion people in the decade to come, an ambition that should appeal to all in this country and a contribution to fighting misinformation worldwide. And perhaps the biggest buttress to independence is openness. Trust is what underpins the BBC. And the suspicion that the BBC is captive to one worldview erodes that trust. Openness to others can surely rebuild it. The BBC has long been indispensable to the UK's creative industries, sustaining skills and giving people a break that they just wouldn't have got elsewhere. But it's much patchier, sometimes positively resistant, when it comes to working with others in news and current affairs. There's, of course, an assistant editor on the Today programme who chooses which stories from the papers to be plugged at 6:10 and 7:40. There's the local democracy reporters programme, which we set up to work with local newsrooms. And the BBC has started choosing a few podcasts to run on sounds. But why can some editions of Panorama be made by independents, but no editions of Newsnight? It's illogical. As if it's somehow all right to open up a fraction of current affairs to independents, but hold the line on news. And I understand why this thinking holds. Traditionally, the BBC has felt that news is too important and too core to its mission to be opened up. But if the lesson of recent years is that it needs to head off accusations of narrowness in its agenda and its approach, which are so corrosive of public trust, then no BBC division needs openness more than news, which paradoxically is the division that has the least of it. So imagine a BBC that thinks of itself as much as the people's platform as a public service broadcaster, one that's home to more varied thinking, but still holds true to standards of truth and accuracy, diversity of opinion, and fair treatment of people in the news. What might that involve? One, it would open up to outside producers to compete to make news and current affairs programmes. Making programmes like Newsnight open to competition and inviting offers for new shows would do for the BBC's mission to inform what it has long done for entertainment, namely bring in fresh ideas and different people, encourage the BBC itself to be more innovative and exciting, spread the economic benefits of the BBC's strength to other parts of the journalism business in the UK. Two, there are things that BBC News can't and shouldn't do, such as take sides, have opinions, champion causes. But there is public service journalism that other newsrooms can do. So if the BBC were to set aside a fund for independent reporting in the public interest, it really could help deal with the UK's own news deserts and information inequality. And three, it could serve as the equivalent of a digital newsstand, a place where you could access a much wider range of voices, where you could give reach to new providers just as they get going, where you could broaden what qualifies as news to include much more of what's happening in the world of food, fashion, the things that people love. The idea of an open platform would invite the BBC to think not just about how it informs and entertains, but how it educates too. How it could partner with the likes of the Open University, how it might work with AI developers to provide a BBC GPT, one that enables people to ask questions without handing over every last detail of what's on their minds to US corporations that have proved obstinately unaccountable in the UK. This is about much more than the BBC. It's a national investment in our future that will come back to reap multi-platform rewards that an investment in no other UK organisation can. Impartiality is essential to the BBC. It's also tricky, as most people don't know what it is, and those who do are often the ones who define it. It's commonly abused by politicians to insert themselves into the conversation about what should be covered by the BBC and how. But an open BBC would do a good deal for impartiality. It would be a BBC that's impartial within its own output and a BBC that is impartial across the outside views that it hosts. Thomas Jefferson made the best ever argument for independent journalism. The basis of our governments being the opinion of the people, were it left to me to decide whether we should have a government without newspapers or newspapers without a government, I should not hesitate a moment to prefer the latter. Last year, as you heard, Tortoise, the slow news startup that I left the BBC to found in 2018, bought The Observer, the world's oldest Sunday newspaper, founded in 1791. Not everyone, it's fair to say, loved the idea of it leaving The Guardian. It had been its home there for 30 years. We believe, though, that we've bought much more than a newspaper. The Observer is a brand. Better still, it's a promise. The Observer was founded with a pledge to share, quote, every species of knowledge that may conduce to the happiness of society. Not far, in fact, from John Reed's belief that the BBC's job is to, quote, bring the best of everything into the greatest number of homes. George Orwell, who after leaving the BBC wrote for The Observer, liked to call it the enemy of nonsense. My point is that media institutions that last know what they're for, and also for whom. The BBC, unlike the other great powers in the world of information and entertainment, is for everyone. One morning, when I was running BBC News, a story cropped up on the news list at the 9 o'clock meeting. Vinyl, apparently, was back. Sales of records were soaring. So we thought it would be fun to send a reporter and a camera down Oxford Street to ask people why. The crew stopped a couple of young people, held up a record and said, "Hi, we're here from BBC 6 o'clock News. Do you know what this is?" And the teenager replied, "Yes, it's a record. What's the 6 o'clock News?" Now, you might take an upbeat view of that moment. You might say, wow, it's exciting to think that there's so much to play for. Or maybe it's a note to self. It shows that you get the best stories sending reporters out to find out what's really going on. But it's also a warning of a world without a common sense of a story, without a shared understanding of the value of facts in an argument, without a place that connects us across generations and continents. One where we find ourselves sitting in the dark, humming those words that Joni Mitchell laid down on vinyl 50-odd years ago. Don't it always seem to go? You don't know what you've got till it's gone. The world is not as we were promised, either by the politicians or the tech evangelists. It's a world where everyone has a typewriter, but fewer are seen or heard. The most powerful man in the world types out sound bites in caps regardless of fact. The richest man in the world is more powerful than any television channel, typing unchecked to an audience of more than 200 million people instantaneously, weighing in behind politicians and parties in places he barely knows. We in this room are lucky enough to have access to what a century ago was the typewriter. Today, it's the screen. TV, in all its forms, is the means of communicating most meaningfully to the largest number of people. The biggest and best typewriter of all in this country is the BBC. My hope this evening has been to make the case for why and how we take care of it. If we wait to see what the future has in store for us, I fear that the recent past can give us the answer already. Bystanding is surrender. We can choose the society we live in, or we can choose not to choose. To be the enemies of nonsense, we need to act now. Thank you.